It's time for the Anchormen Podcast with Matt Gates and Dan Ball.
Hey, welcome into Friday's edition of the Anchormen Podcast. I'm Dan Ball alongside Riley Lewis, two of your Anchormen here at OAN, the One America News Network. Loving that we are going into month 6 almost of these podcasts. And I got to say, some days I think I'd rather do these than the Monday through Friday talk show. How about you? They're a lot of fun.
Yes, so much. I just love the format. I like that we can go deep with one guest. Talk show, it's nice. You get 5 different people, but it's like shotgun, rapid fire. You get 5 to 6 minutes, which is nice because you get some variety. But going deeper with people, I think, it's more impactful. And it means
and it's the old formula. And look, let's be real. People under my age, under 50, under 40, your age, 20-something, they don't like traditional. They like the podcast. They want the long format, which always is interesting to me. And I keep having to ask this question of you. Why is it your generation can only watch a minute 30 to 2 minute video? They tell us on social media, if you put anything longer, nobody will watch it. It won't get likes and clicks and downloads. But they want a 2 or 3 hour podcast like Joe Rogan. Why is that, Riley?
Well, by the same token, this is the same generation that also binge watches TV shows. So it's a weird, inconsistent thing.
Okay. So you have no answer for your generation.
I don't, other than it's the perfect mix because you can play a podcast for 4 hours and not actually have to watch it. You can be driving, cooking, doing whatever. So it's flexible.
Got it.
You can,
you can
start
listen.
and stop, and it's on demand whenever you want. You don't have to tune in for the 6 o'clock news and then stay there the whole time.
Yeah, I feel like a talk show where it's guest after guest and subject after subject. You need to visualize, see it while you're listening.
Yes.
But a podcast, you're right, you can listen to. And let me just put a little warning out. I apologize for my condition. I've been sick since last week, as you know. I missed a couple days this week on the air. A bug got me, so I'm a little under the weather.
But you're feeling better, though, right?
Way better. Yes.
Upswing?
I'm not contagious anymore, Riley.
Okay. All right.
Before we get to our amazing guest tonight, I thought we would revisit for folks just a little background behind you and I becoming journalists and then becoming national talk show host, because our guest tonight is somebody that, let me just say, folks, before we bring her on, I respect the hell out of. This woman, not only being an award-winning, investigative, badass journalist, she's been to some of the craziest ends of the earth covering stories that matter to our nation, to the world for decades. She has gone through hell, and I'm sure she'll tell her private story, tons of stuff. And yet she continues to speak truth to power, investigate stories that matter, and report. And to me, she's one of the best journalists out there and has been. I remember when her and I were both younger, because we're about the same age, I always remember looking up to her as I was working up local news affiliates around the country. She was already at the network, kicking some serious butt, and different networks covering things. Wartime correspondent, real serious investigative journalism, not this fluffy fake news BS we see today. At all. So I'm very excited about our guest tonight. But anyway, everybody knows my background. Military journalist, got out, local news guy, been doing it 30-some years, ran for Congress, failed miserably, and then luckily got an amazing job here at OAN. And the Herrings trusted me with a microphone and a set for the last 5 years. A guy named DJT happened to be a fan of the show, started tweeting me and inviting me for interviews. And the last 5 years have been wild and crazy. I am very, very blessed. That's my story in a 1-minute nutshell on how I got to where I'm at anyway. Riley, tell them your story about why you wanted to get on the boob tube and be an anchor man.
Well, I've talked about this for a while. It's what I feel most called to do, quite frankly. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life and just never been happy with any of them. They were all just paychecks, working 9 to 5, punch in, punch out, don't think about it. This is different. This is extremely different.
It's a mission.
It is.
I'm a vet, so I would say, we're looking for, once you get out, you're looking for new missions.
Well, it is. And
you're on a mission in your young life.
It is. And it was, just inspired. My great-grandfather served. He was a brigadier general in the Marine Corps. And
nice.
I'm not even anywhere close to that. I'm just a civilian. But that really inspired me. And I thought, as a kid, I just want to do something to contribute to this country. I love this place. That's all I know. That's where I'm coming from. I've been MAGA since day one, since I came out of the womb.
And he's born and raised Californian, folks, right?
Yes.
Encinitas, California.
That's right.
Great job, parents of Riley, by the way, to turn a California boy into a true conservative in this California state. And I believe you said on the first episode that you appeared on, Rush Limbaugh was a big inspiration, and you wanted to be like the new little Rush.
Yes. Rush Limbaugh, local guys like Roger Hedgecock, Larry Elder back in the day when he was still broadcasting out of LA. I grew up on that stuff, and so I don't know what it is, but it struck me very early on. It's all I could think about, all I wanted to talk about with my friends and family. I drove people nuts, and so I thought one day, if I could just find a way to do that professionally, I'd be happy as a clam. And like you said, by the grace of God and the Herrings, I was given an opportunity, jumped on it, then another opportunity, and another one, and doors just kept opening and opening.
That's right. You started here as what, a writer, then a
Yes.
producer.
Yes.
You went from the newsroom over to the talk show side.
Well, I started with a talk show, but
Oh, you did?
writer, then producer, then booker, then occasional guest, fill-in, then guest host. And by the grace of the herrings and God, I found myself here.
Yeah.
I'm extremely grateful. Every day is just a blessing. I'm very excited to be here, and it's a movement we're a part of.
Yeah.
Being a part of something bigger than just yourself is where you find real meaning and purpose in life.
Yeah, I look at us right now. You know, for 4 years, we had to be opposition media to a regime that was ruining this nation.
Yes.
We went through how much hell at this network, right? I mean, besides individual hell of the death threats, yep, we get them. So what? Don't care. Keep them coming, psycho lefties. The death threats, the cancellation, they yanked us off how many carriers. They scared away our advertisers. They were trying to shut us down with lawfare, with cancellation, with anything they could, censorship, with lies, with letters from Democrats. It didn't work. Thank God MAGA won in November. And now places like One America News, one of the last family-owned and operated national broadcasting networks out there, is getting a bigger and even better platform. We're getting on more carriers. We're getting on more social media outlets. We're getting advertisers coming back. Just things are happening for the good. And just goes to show that if you stand by your convictions, your beliefs, this nation and the America First movement, good things will happen. You will be blessed. You might have to go through a little hell.
When they go after you that hard, that consistently, you are right over the target. The truth tellers of this world, they get punished, they get chased out of town. Look at what they did to Socrates nearly thousands of years ago. They put him to death for telling people to question authority and ask questions of their leaders. That's it. So there's always been a concerted war in this world because it's a fallen world. There's evil in it, and those evil forces go after the truth tellers. That's what they've always done. They'll continue to do that. But as long as, like you said, people stay strong, they stay in the trenches, and they join forces, then we can overcome that.
Yep.
You know?
And our guest tonight has done that. She has faced that. She has been canceled. She's been fired. And you know what she does? She keeps right on going. Just like me. That's why I love the hell out of this brave woman. And I hear her chuckling in my ear. So I think it's about time to bring her on. There was so much news in the past week or two that I think this was the perfect guest to bring on because of the wars in the Middle East. She has covered the Middle East. Because of the lies being told by the fake news. She used to be part of mainstream media like me. She left it. So all the things that have been going on in the last several weeks under the Trump administration, under the fake news media, in and around the globe, I thought it would be fitting to bring investigative journalist, award-winning investigative journalist, Lara Logan, and my friend on the Anchormen Podcast. It's the Anchor People Podcast. we invite
I love the title. I love it.
You like that?
It's fabulous.
Good. I know you've never been a guest. She's been on the talk show several times over the last 4 or 5 years, Laura, and thank you for that, dear. Appreciate it. But I knew this hour in the podcast would be a lot better than the 5 or 8 minutes you and I usually get to go over tons of serious subjects that matter to the American people, and you got to try and digest it all and get it all fit into a perfect little 3, 4, 5 minute box, and that's very difficult. So welcome, Lara. How are you, dear?
I'm good. Thank you, Dan. I'm very happy to be here. I enjoyed your conversation.
Well, Riley and I try to just, wing it the first few minutes and let the folks know who we are, what we're going to talk about, what's coming up, and then hopefully they stick around for the next hour and hang out. And if they don't know you, they should. And so one thing we get to do on this podcast versus the talk shows is we get to find out who the heck you are. Because every time you appear, whether you're on with us or any other networks, I'm sure, Laura, it's just it's your quick accolades, your title, and then boom, get to the subjects. Nobody knows who Lara is unless you do the Wikipedia, and can you trust that crap? No. So let's,
don't do Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to the horse's mouth, as my grandma used to say. It's not a flattering statement, but it's, get it from the source.
I understand.
You get it. So
I get it. Yes.
Go back. How does South African Lara Logan become this force to be reckoned with in American media, who rises to the top? You were literally are one of the best. You were at the top of your game at the big network, CBS and others. And then a lot of stuff happened in between. And now here we are today, where you are, like me, outside the mainstream media, ripping them and telling the truth. So let's start back with the child, Lara, and why and how you became a journalist. We gave our little 2 cents for a minute or two. Fill us in.
Well, I became a journalist when I was 17 years old. I was still in my final year of high school. And, for me, I understood very much that if you haven't lived, if you haven't seen something, it's very hard to have anything valuable to contribute, right? Especially as a writer. And we were raised around books and reading and very much raised to know who we were and what we stood for. And in my family, I had lots of sisters and brothers. And if you didn't know how to speak up, you were kind of squashed. So a little bit of that is in my DNA. But I will tell you, Dan, my oldest memories as a child are of the pain that I felt whenever I experienced or witnessed or heard about injustice. That was a driving force for me all through my life. And growing up in South Africa under apartheid, which was a racially based system, the injustice of that sort of never left me. It informed me all the time. I remember having arguments with lots and lots of kids when I was in school and being a general pain in the what. And so I got my first job at a newspaper when I was still in high school, and I never looked back. Honestly, I was like a high-speed train, and I just kept going. And growing up in Africa, it's not that I'm not scared of anything. It's just that we had a different threshold. We would go on vacation for 6 weeks to a place that only had dirt roads, where there were no doctors or hospitals or anything like that, that were nearby. And when your car broke down, you sat at the side of the road in the pitch dark, hoping that somehow someone would come along and help you. It was, it was a different time. No internet, no cell phones, no email, none of that stuff. When I was 17, I went and lived on the other side of the world in France, and then I moved to New York. And, I just remember understanding what that sense was of being completely and utterly alone and having to define who I really was. And I think those were very good foundational aspects of what really drove me to fulfill what I think I always knew I would be. I'm a writer and I'm a storyteller. And mostly, I have a really good BS meter.
Yeah, I think I do too. Now, and you say a different era too. Don't forget, this is a woman trying to break into journalism. Let's be real. I'm doing math, 17, about 1989, you're 17, 1990, somewhere in there, right?
88.
88. Okay, I was close. That was close.
Yeah.
I'm thinking women weren't breaking into American media. Back in 88, you had Diane Sawyer and you had Barbara Walters, and that's about it.
It's a very interesting point that you raised, Dan, because I have today the same hair that I had when I spent over 2 years trying to get a job at CNN in London. And I remember the bureau chief telling me, if you really want a job, you better do something about that hair. Oh, wow. And I was just crushed. I'd been writing to him for 2 years at that point, I think, somewhere around that. And I went out onto the street outside the London bureau, and I stood there for a moment. I thought, do I go home and cry? Do I go to the hairdresser and get my hair cut? And then I'm like, hell no, I'm not getting my hair cut.
Good for
what
you.
What on earth am I thinking about? This is like who I am. And amazingly, I don't talk about this a lot. But honestly, it really is true that when I was trying to get a job in American media, especially in the networks as a war correspondent, there were only Canadians on air. Besides Christiane Amanpour at CNN, which was cable, it was a network, right? There was only Americans and Canadians. And so it was a really big deal. Firstly, most war correspondents were men. And there had never been a South African woman reporting on evening, network news, let alone 60 Minutes. Are you kidding me?
I know.
That's the holy
When I saw you pop up, let me tell you how impressed I was. I was like, whoa, because Lara brings the goods. Not just, again, you heard that news director told her, oh, change your hair, because of course they just cared about looks back then. Not, oh my God, she can actually write and report and she's fearless. Oh no, forget all that. She's a woman and your hair don't look right. What a moron. Where's that idiot today? Anyway, not where you're
at. Who
at.
knows and who cares, Dan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amen.
But I remember seeing you do those 60-minute reports and I was just like, that gal, whoa. She has, and then I would see you go to the most war-torn regions of the planet and cover them with just you and the camera guy. I would hope some security detail, probably back in the day, maybe not. You and a camera guy.
Sometimes not.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. No security. Think about that. A woman journalist in the 80s and 90s with just a camera guy going to war-torn nations, interviewing the bad guys. She got interviewed with some of the biggest, and we'll get to who you've interviewed over the decades. all by herself. I mean, yeah, there's a camera guy there. So what? What's he going to do? Hit him with the camera?
Sometimes a camera guy, not always. I mean, a lot of the time, I loved the team aspect of television.
Me too.
But I didn't always have it. So, like in Ramadi, Iraq, where the Marines had to run the whole time on their operations because they were under sniper fire constantly. The captain said, "Your crew's not going to make it." So I said, "Well, you just take me." And I just went and did it myself.
Wow. Think
Respect.
about that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Okay, so you leave South Africa, you're a teenager, you know that you're going to be a journalist, and I'm going to brag you up because let's be real, you are not hard on the eyes. You're very easy on the eyes, Lara. And so I know there was some modeling back when you were younger as well, along with it. You got to pay the bills, you got to eat. So you're doing that while you're trying to be a serious journalist and get these stupid American men running our networks to pay attention to you. You get that first. What's the first big break on one of the biggest ones where you get the gig? And then let's go into some of the interviews you've done because, again, phenomenal resume here. But tell us that first big break.
So, Dan, in South Africa, it was a big story. Apartheid, the end of apartheid was a story all over the world. And so I worked with a lot of foreign media. And I got, I worked, by the time I graduated from high school, I had a, significant resume in terms of reporting. And then when I went through college, I worked my whole way through college for a huge newspaper in South Africa. And I made my opportunities there. I got my first front page headline on the Lockerbie bombing when I was able to break the story of a South African who was on board that plane that went down. That was 1985.
Yes,
by the way.
I remember the Lockerbie, but holy cow.
That was
That was
88 or 89?
Christmas Day, 1985. My first headline.
She was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was in middle school. You and I are about 3 or 4 years apart, I think.
Well, I'm 54.
I'll be 51 this year. You were born in 71 or 2?
71.
I'm 74. Okay, keep going. Sorry. Yep.
Wow.
So same era here.
I got a job in television, honestly, by the time when I got out of college, by just taking the Foreign Correspondents Association book and going, through it and basically begging people to hire me. And I got a job at Reuters, international news agency, which was a great place to learn. And I learned from really some of the best television and newsmen in the world. And then I was there for years, and I was running the Southern Africa Bureau. We did a lot of amazing work. We got satellite feeds out of places that didn't have television, and I earned a lot of respect of people from the networks because they were all clients. And so then one day when I had a fight with my boss, I slammed the newsroom door as hard as I could. I really hoped it would break because it was half glass at the top off. But unfortunately, it resisted. And I knew it was time. Because, in a news agency, that's where you really learn your hard news skills. Mm-hmm. But those who stay, usually end up very bitter and defeated. And so there's a moment, I was warned by some older journalists, there's a moment where you need to get out. And I figured, I loved it there, but I figured this was my moment to get out. And I moved to London. I worked freelance at ABC News and at NBC News, actually. And then I got a full-time job. Now, I was on the news desk. I hated that job. Honestly, it was torture for me. I was using about 1/100th of my skills, but I knew I had to pay my dues. And so I did. But in between that, when opportunities would arise, like a friend of mine was running the Reuters Bureau in Jerusalem, and during the Second Intifada, a British station was looking for a local reporter. So he called me in London. I called them in London and I said, hey, by the way, I'm based in Jerusalem, but I'm just visiting friends in London. I hear you need someone, and I slept on his couch. Well, I spent a lot of time in Ramallah, at that time. And I created opportunities along the way until I eventually got that break at CNN. And, honestly, I hated it. It was not for me. I thought it was the ultimate combination of hard breaking news, but also being on air. And what I found was that there were a lot of people who didn't care about real journalism. And I was not, I'm better with when I have time to investigate and think and learn. I don't like to pretend I know about something if I haven't had a chance to learn about it. So it wasn't for me. And the people were brutal. And I actually went to British television, and I don't know how I got the job there because at the interview they asked me who at their news station I liked watching on air, and I'd never watched their news station. I had never ever seen.
Did you tell a little white lie and make somebody's name up, or you just went, "They're all great. I love them all."
No, I couldn't do it. I had to say, I don't know any.
Wow.
I knew one person who had worked for, and they said, besides him, besides Martin, who else do you know? And I was like, I couldn't name a single person. So, I came out of that interview. I remember standing on the street. I called my husband at the time. I've only been married twice. I don't want to make that sound like a multiple serial thing. But I called him and I said, I am not going to get this job. And I don't deserve it. Because I had never, ever interviewed for a job in my entire life.
Wow.
Every other job I had gotten, I had walked into someone's door, through their door, and said, you need to hire me, and this is why. And they did. Usually they did.
Wow.
So anyway, I did get that job.
Wow.
Amazingly. And I ended up going all over the world for them. But most importantly, I ended up in Afghanistan. And I had connections at CBS and other places. But CBS ended up in the Afghan war in that right after 9/11 with nobody. And I went on a journey to get there. I mean, at first, British TV wasn't going to send a little girl to war, but, they knew I could do it. And at one night when I was arrested actually in a French prison, because I was covering the Afghans trying to get from France into England. That's where they sent me because they didn't think I could get into Afghanistan because it was still under Taliban control. And they called me when I came off the air one night. I got out of the jail, quickly did my live hit, my phone rings, and I'm like, and they said, do you still think you can get to Afghanistan? And I was basically like, there's a bear poop in the woods. Yes, of course I can get there. And I relied on a bunch of friends. And, at that time, the Afghan government was in exile in Germany. I had to go all over the place. So that was quite a story. But I ended up flying in with an Afghan minister across the border from Tajikistan in the north. With a bunch of Afghan pilots in a very broken helicopter that had literally crashed 3 times and been glued together, and being dumped by the side of a river in the middle of the night in a house full of Afghan men.
It's like the plot of a movie. I can't believe
anybody that wants to call themselves a journalist today, sit down, shut up, get in the back of the bus. Here's the driver.
Start taking
Talk
notes.
to Lara, take some notes. Then we'll see if you're a journalist on CNN or MSDNC or the big old 3, ABC, NBC, CBS. We got I'm sure I don't want to trash talk everybody out there, but I do want to trash talk almost everybody out there because I don't see people acting like journalists today doing what Lara Logan has done.
Well, if I may, I do wonder, at some point I would love to get your take on the state of journalism in America today, across the West too, but just to see how the industry's changed from when you started to where we are now.
Yeah, because you worked at Reuters.
Yes.
And back then, I would say Reuters was very respectable. Today, if we watched how they've covered, especially the Trump administration and other things, I wouldn't say that today. You were at CNN 30, 35 years ago. We would say they might have been the most trusted name in news. Today, I wouldn't wipe my if they printed on their news on paper. You were at CBS. You were at NBC. Again, all of these networks today, I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw them. Back in the day, just like Lara, I looked up to them and went, oh my God, if I could get to a CNN or a Fox as I'm working my way up these local news markets, making, more money, more background, more resume building, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. Today, I wouldn't want any of those jobs.
And the landscape has changed too. You used to have independent papers. We talked about this being a family-owned network. You used to see that more in localities, where cities, counties, even small towns would have at least 1 or 2 hard-hitting journalists that would go out and do research and spend weeks and months working on a story, then come out with a big break.
All owned by big conglomerates, and they spew it down and they just regurgitate.
And if it was really good, though, then it would go national, and that could be your big break. So I don't know what happened to that. It's really sad that it's gone. For the most part.
I can speak to some of that. I'll tell you why local news is so important, because local news is where you have real accountability, right? Because you bump into the people that you're writing about. It's right there in your face. There's a reason that the cartels kill so many Mexican journalists. But I can go into Mexico and do some, significant reporting, but I'm not I'm at risk, but not to the same degree as a local journalist.
That's a great point.
And if you look at the DuPont Silver Baton, the Columbia DuPont Awards is really kind of the Pulitzer of television reporting. Well, most of those go to local news reporters, because that's where your real shoe leather investigative journalism, holding people to account, really happens. And what is the extension of local news reporting is beat reporting, right? So if I fly into Afghanistan once every couple months, it's not the same thing as when I've been reporting there for 10 years. I lived for 5 years in Baghdad at the CBS News Bureau. So when people came in, when some general, the chief of staff, or joint chiefs of staff, or congressman flew in there, they didn't really want to get interviewed by me because I knew too much. That's the reality. When you're in local news and when you have a beat, you often know too much. It's not, it's not a given. It's not to say that if you don't have that you don't know anything at all. But it's still, at the same time, that is the devil is in the details, and it's the heart and soul of journalism. But those people just, those publications get priced out of the market.
Yeah.
And this,
Yes.
it's consistent if you look across industry, right? The same thing has happened in healthcare. You have these big healthcare companies that are gobbling up rural hospitals and rural clinics. You have
Right.
it in,
You don't
even
get that local
in
doc
the
anymore.
HVAC system. I heard this the other day. In the HVAC system, there's big companies been gobbling up all these smaller companies. So now if you want to get your, anything repaired in many of these cities, you get the same prices quoted you no matter who you go to, because the mom and pop shops are gone.
Yeah.
It's the same in the food processing industry. It's the same in big agriculture. I mean, what is
Excellent
happening?
point.
Yeah, look at all the
what's happening
farmers and
in
ranchers that are getting
Westfield.
gobbled up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
we're eating hormone-injected,
Yes.
massive chickens that shouldn't be 3 times the size they are.
Horizontal and vertical integration all at the same time, and it's really sad to see that. And the collateral damage it's very obvious in news media.
Well, and I think local news in America is dead. She's talking, I think, about other countries too, where the local news reporter or whatever still has a fighting chance. In America, all the local newspapers, all the local radio stations, all the local news affiliates, they're all owned now by either Sinclair, Nexstar, or the big 3 broadcasting companies, ABC, NBC, CBS. That's it. So there's no more local mom and pops, really, that can tell the truth. I hate to say journalism's dead, but on the local level and national, it's about 98% dead. There's a handful of us left out here doing it, like Lara, like OAN. I'll give Rav credit. I'll give Right Side credit.
Carol Atkinson, Catherine Harry, John Solomon at Just the News.
Oh, love Solomon, Just the News. Right. But again, when you look at the overall numbers, we're still outnumbered. And that's why we got to keep going, Lara, because we're still outnumbered by, as Trump loves to call them, the fake news. And it really is these days when you look at how much their hands are tied, and some of them don't even care anymore because they're either activists working there, so they believe the garbage they're saying, or they just keep their mouth shut for their paycheck. Let's be real.
To your point, though, I think the problem, this is why so many Americans, you look at all the polls now, and just sticking with America, the levels of distrust in media, all-time high right now, is skyrocketing. And it's across the board.
Is the media lower than Congress? I think it is.
Maybe it is.
And that's bad.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Yeah.
And used car salesmen.
Yes.
I think used car salesmen might be higher than journalists these days, Lara. They might be. By the way, grab yourself some bourbon. This is a podcast. We like to have a little bourbon while we're sitting here. We like to loosen up and relax.
Yes.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Get some
Thanks
wine.
for telling me now.
Get him you got aides there. You got helpers. I saw a guy.
AIDS. That's Luke Coffey. He's our local insurrectionist. He's been on your show, Dan. You should know Luke Coffey.
Grab her a beer, a mimosa, a Bloody Mary, something. Will you? Get her a cocktail.
Even a sparkling water, something.
Come on.
Yes. Come on in.
So here's the
No,
thing.
remember Luke Coffey? He's the one, he held up the crutch over the West Tunnel where the violence was and prayed.
Oh, yes. That's okay. The tunnel.
Stein was actually your hosting for you, your guest host when I was on.
Yes. Okay. Stein was filling in. Hi, brother. How's it going?
Yeah.
So he was there where, ask him, what was the gal's name that got beat by
Roseanne
the cops?
Boylan.
Yes, Roseanne.
Yeah.
Oh, man. They beat the hell out
I
of
think it
her.
was
30-some
Ashley Babbitt that was from
strikes.
San Diego, right?
Ashley's from here. Yeah, we've had her mom, her husband, everything on my
veteran,
show.
right?
She was an Air Force vet like me. Yeah. Yeah.
So then looking, because it's very obvious that when you look at the fake news media, it's fake because there's an obvious political agenda behind everything they're saying. I just want to know how we got from a place of at least somewhat objectivity and some diversity of thought to a place where everything is controlled, it's all top down, it's not grassroots, and there's a very overt political agenda behind it all. Because that's why people can see that. That's
And why did it go to the left? Why didn't it go to the right?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
I want to know from Lara, why do you think it went to the radical left? Why did the media adhere to this socialist radical left ideology instead of a patriotic American conservative right-leaning media? I mean, it shouldn't be biased at all. I shouldn't say that.
No, but that's a good question.
I'm just still blown away why it went so damn far left. Lara?
Well, I can tell you, I can actually answer that, and it's in part because of the takeover of the teachers union, and takeover of the schools. And if you look back, remember when in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was running, there were a lot of articles about how this was her, finally, this was her fulfilling her destiny, that she was destined to be the first female president of the United States. And so as part of that information operation, which is really what it was, one of the things that they did was they leaked or put out there and amplified the speech that Hillary Clinton made when she was one of 3 students who were the first to give this speech at their own graduation, right? Which was, that's a big deal. That speech is normally reserved for a big guest. And so Hillary was one of them. And I remember reading this speech and the words that stuck out to me, and if it's still out there, anybody can verify this. But she basically said that our academic institutions are not yet in line with our way of thinking, but they will be. And that was really interesting to me. Now that I know that people are selected along the way, it wasn't because she was so brilliant. It was because somebody chose her.
There you go.
They chose to back that horse in this race, right? And so, and when you look at the Franklin, I think it's the Franklin School is what it's called, that came over to the United States right at the beginning of the Second World War, just before the beginning
of the Frankfurt School, right? Maybe it's
the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so when you look at the Frankfurt School, what was that a product of? That was, at that point, the Marxists had recognized that the American dream was an impediment to Marxism in America. Okay, because the American worker is a heroic figure in this country. And what is that American dream represents? Hope, right? So through your own work, through your own productivity, through your own initiative, you can rise, up the ranks in the United States. That's why the middle class is so important, because if you're born into the low class or, or lower middle class, you have the ability to improve your life, if not for you, for your children. Well, they had realized that this was, this really made the American worker an unreliable partner in the fight for communism, Marxism. So what did they turn to? Cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
And cultural Marxism is where first of all, the 60s, all the drugs, free love, all of that, right? That's where the hedonism became part of American culture. And that's where they began infiltrating. Who did the Frankfurt School work with? They worked with Columbia University.
There you go. The university, and that's, that's what it all goes back to, is they infiltrated the universities in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they turned this radical left-wing, anti-American Marxist agenda into fricking part of the curriculum.
Oh my God.
And so now she's right. Think about this. Now that's why 90-some% of the journalists are these leftist, socialist idiots espousing this stuff, because they got taught this for 4 years, 6 years, whatever, while they were in college by these radical professors. And that's why we keep saying we've got to get this crap out of the college campuses.
We do.
ASAP.
And think about this. Every teacher in a school has to have liability insurance. Who gives them liability insurance? The teachers union. I mean, have you ever union?
The unions.
I'm sorry.
As radical as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about during COVID. Who is the one that told JoJo and everybody to continue the lockdown BS? That nasty, what's her name?
Was it Weingarten?
That horrible little note, Randy Weingarten.
Oh, that you want to talk
woman who
about.
just
left.
My ex-wife's a teacher. My kiddo's 17. She was deeply affected by the COVID lockdowns. I'm so pissed at Gavin Newsom and Randy Weingarten. The stuff they did to millions of our children during the 4 years.
It's actually evil.
It is evil. And this is something that Lara says all the time, and she knows I say it as well. Forget saying it's left-right. It's Republican-Democrat. The stuff we're going through right now is good versus evil in this country, on this planet.
Yes, it is.
That is
Period. The devil is at work, and we better look. This is his playground, okay?
Yes.
And if we don't start taking it seriously, that it's good versus evil, not a political party versus political party, we're gonna, I hope not lose this battle, but let's lose the battle so we can win the overall war of good versus evil. And that's what it is. I think everything.
All of these regimes, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot in Cambodia, whoever it is.
Devil had his hand on their shoulder.
Yes,
bro,
and they
right
all
there,
understood the
guiding them.
incredible effectiveness of constantly pushing propaganda, of brainwashing people. Because you look at Trump, he goes from being basically universally loved. TV star, businessman, he's a hero. He's at, rap or
mentioned it. I was watching an old movie the other day and they mentioned, Trump. And I looked at Peyton and I went, did you hear that Trump reference? It was like a 1989 movie.
I mean,
They've been talking about him for 40 years.
When I grew up, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, The Apprentice was one of the top rated shows for years and years and years on what I would consider to be a left-leaning news network.
Oh, you think? NBC?
Yes.
That's Lara Logan.
Totally. But then to see everybody just flip on him radically on a dime, overnight, xenophobe, racist, misogynist. Where were you guys for the last 50 plus years? This is absurd to me, but it worked. They all pushed it. They pounded the pavement. They all worked together in unison, using the exact same talking points verbatim.
That is one thing you got to give the crazy left.
Like 50 different anchors saying the exact same thing, verbatim, word for word, at the exact same time. I mean, like, what is that? It's like it seems like a concerted effort, but again, it just.
Of course, it is.
But
it's called information dominance. That's what it's called. They had information dominance, and they could orchestrate the message. Yes. And they rule by tyranny and fear. So you don't have freedom. If you go back to the Washington Free Beacon, they had a document that they put out the weekend that Trump was being inaugurated in 2017. Yep. And in this document, they talk about how they're going to go after Trump and go after the right. But one of the big sections in there is how they will target their own if anybody gets out of line. And by out of line, the document says by normalizing Trump. Like, you're not allowed to normalize him. One of the main lines of operation of that
not allowed to normalize him
was to say that he was not a legitimate president. So if you referred to him or treated him in any way as if he was legitimate, that was like a war crime for them. And it even talked about going after their own people harder than they do the other side. So they use tyranny, they use fear, they use intimidation, and they punish you. You know, you're not allowed to run without going through Act Blue. If you're not going to use their mechanism to collect money, then you're out. You know, there's no freedom, there's no choice, there's no free will.
Well, and fast forward to today.
Not our way or the highway.
Yeah, and fast forward to today, look at, and I'm going to brag on my Air Force, since I love that I was a Zoomie. I was a Chair Force for all you grunts and jarheads and squids out there, and coasties and Space Forces. I was an Air Force guy. So I want to brag on these B-2 bomber pilots who did 37 hours in the cockpit and then committed a successful mission, unlike CNN and the rest have been reporting. Until today, I noticed CNN, others now were backtracking. They had experts on going, nope, yep, they actually destroyed them. I found it so fitting that when the military, separate from President Donald J. Trump, does a successful mission, back in the day under Obama, even under W, under Clinton, they would brag up the military, no problem. They'd have a reporter, Lara, you probably did some, go like with the unit and highlight what they did and highlight the aircraft and how difficult this was. Nobody's out there bragging up the Air Force. They're just all going, Trump failed, didn't happen, they didn't blow it all up, they'll still get nukes. They had to trash talk them because Trump was involved. And to me, journalism was dead right there. When you can't get behind our troops as an American journalist for doing a good job and separate Donald J. Trump, who you obviously hate, you left-wing nutbags masquerading as journalists, you're done. You're over. You're pathetic. Stop calling yourself journalist. Just say, hi, I'm Wolf Blitzer, Mr. Activist with a beard here at CNN, because that's all you are. You're a freaking left-wing activist. So damn tired of it.
But speaking of the intel, the kerfuffle going on with this intelligence that CNN cited, I want to get your take, Laura, because this is what I've noticed too, and it drives me absolutely crazy. They always say things like, according to sources familiar with the matter.
A source familiar.
So it's like, seriously, when did journalists or even just news organizations stop citing credible people and just say, or at least disclosing that? Because I think if you have some...
When Obama came on the scene.
We deserve to know, though, who these alleged sources are, right?
When Obama came, when their savior came on the scene, that's when they stopped.
It's absurd to me.
Well, you know, anonymous sourcing sometimes is an important tool.
Sure, I agree.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you know, I've done sources. I've had sources that I haven't been able to identify. Okay. Sometimes because they're in fear of their own life. Okay. Sometimes because you've got a child sex trafficking victim.
Sure, that's understandable. But in this case, Laura, we're not talking about that. They're they just want to rip Trump and it's somebody inside the government somewhere that told us a source.
It's happening on a daily basis now.
Give me a break.
Okay, so what's happened is that it's completely been abused and exploited, right? Yeah, okay. And there's no justification for how they use it. And not only that, you can recognize the patterns here of an information op, right? If you're paying attention, look what happened. You have one report that's supposedly an early report, right, that makes an assessment that is contrary to all the other evidence, what's coming out from the floor, the ground in Iran, what's coming from the regime in Iran, what's coming from Israel, which is our main intelligence gathering, human intelligence gathering network in the region, what's coming out of our own intelligence agencies, and so on and so on. So what does that remind you of? Do you remember the analyst out of Benghazi? Remember when Mike Morrell came out there and he had that one analyst that said that it was the film There was people upset about the film and it wasn't a terrorist attack.
In
So this is
Benghazi.
a
Yeah,
tactic
that stupid
they
cartoon.
use.
Yep.
They create they create the internal report that they need to set the false narrative, and then they leak it, and then it gets presented as if it's the entire assessment, and now everybody's chasing their tails. At a certain point, I got to tell you, at a certain point, and perhaps we're not there yet, because I recognize that this is a vast, this is a vast issue. This administration is really up against it. They're trying to change, an operation that began tactically, like 100 years ago, right? You're talking about 1913 Federal Reserve Act, laying the foundation for the NGO industrial complex and the money laundering that has been financing this. So this is a significant operation, and it is not easy I give them grace, because it is not easy to take on what President Trump has taken on.
Thank you.
Yes.
However, at the same time, if these people are able to act with impunity, they will keep committing the same crimes over and over.
Yeah, no, we've got to get,
Well said.
listen, the folks, the FBI, the DOJ, Trump administration in general, you have got to start holding these people accountable. We've got to get them out of their positions, because she's right, it will continue. But I'm glad that you said that, Lara, because there have been folks in the last couple of weeks, and I'd say the last few months, that, I'm disappointed with Trump. He's not doing this yet. I'm disappointed with this guy or gal. She's not doing that yet.
How many of those are bots?
Do you really? Oh, no,
how many of those
there's
are
some folks in the America
operatives?
First movement that have been saying it, and I won't throw people under the bus, because I don't do that, because I want all of us in the movement to stay together. So I don't throw them under the bus, but here's the deal. They've been saying it, like, why isn't Trump doing it? First of all, it's been, 5.5, 6 months since he put his hand up on January 20th. And did you hear what Lara Logan just said? Do you know how big of a machine this is to try and unravel, to try and peel the onion layers back and clean this stuff up? You can't just do it in 5, 6 months. Trump tried it in the first administration, but he had a bunch of bad actors working for him. This time he brought in new people, but the bad actors are still there. And so this is going to take
There's a lot of bad actors there. There are people that are hard to get rid of. They're dealing with the lawfare. It's a little bit disappointing that they don't have a better strategy for that, because, you had to see that one coming. And they are also dealing with the fact that many of these agencies are still staffed with people who are subverting them.
Exactly.
The president's executive orders at this point are not being carried out. This is a big, big deal. I think they're around, I'm not 100% certain of this figure, but I've been told they're only around 30% staffed, and that people are not sure what is actually reaching the president. This is something of concern that is raised with me over and over and over again. Lots of different sources, different issues completely. People are concerned about the sort of the difficulty of getting through to the president and getting any real time with him. And they're concerned that he isn't perhaps being informed about everything that's going on. For example, how many appointments were made the day you took over, and how many appointments have been confirmed, and how many are still waiting to be confirmed? What about your ambassadors? There's a lot of ambassadors that are still staffed with Biden's ambassadors. There's a lot of embassies.
That's true. I wonder if they're letting him know. And you know what? You're right, Lara, because I've had, and I won't discuss personal texts or conversations, but I have spoken with the president only once or twice since he's been in, several times over the last 4 years while he was not in. And even when he wasn't in too, some of the people around him, I would see him for an interview or something at Mar-a-Lago, an event, and I would say something to him, and he would go, really, I didn't know that. And I'm like, no one told you, Mr. President? No, let me show you. And I would show him the proof, or send him a text and show him the proof. And he was like, and then he would look over and tell his staffer, whether it was Margot or somebody, look into this, show it to her, look into this right away. Because you're right, sometimes it doesn't reach. We all think that the president's all knowing, but again, there's a lot of handlers.
But he has gatekeepers.
Yeah, there's gatekeepers, handlers, there's layers of it.
Knowing everything.
And he may not be getting the information. That's a great point.
And as the executive, he's overseeing hundreds and hundreds of agencies that are all staffed by unelected bureaucrats. They have their own staffing, their own agendas. They're there for 20, 30 years with their own plans. And at some point, it's like, okay, so we do this thing called an election. We vote for a leader. We expect him to govern. He has his vision and people he wants to work with. But you have all these people that are they're working in the shadows all the time with very, very little.
That's why our jobs are so important. Lara's job's so important because he does watch us. We know that he watches independent journalists nowadays, and he watches the mainstream. He watches it all. The guy sleeps 4 hours a night, if that.
Yes.
I mean, you were at my house a couple weeks ago, and I called him at 11 o'clock on a Saturday after the parade, and he picked up.
That's right.
And he was awake, and he'd been going all day. Right? The guy doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
He's trying to make frickin' America great again for us. I mean, it's a 79-year-old man who goes and goes and goes for you and me, folks.
It's unbelievable.
And so for the folks in the movement that keep bagging, why didn't Trump do this? Why hasn't Trump done that? Why isn't Trump's people doing this? remember what Lara just said. There's a lot of gatekeepers. There's a lot of layers. And it's only been 5-6 months. It's going to take time to peel these stinky layers back and throw them away. And they might not get all done. This might take the next administration. We got to get JD in. JD's going to have to keep cleaning.
I don't know. I wouldn't count on that,
Oh, I know they're going to fight to take it all back.
There's very significant things that have to be fixed before you can even, have a prayer that there'll be a J.D. Vance administration or another Republican administration. I mean, there has to be serious accountability. And people like John Brennan really need to be stopped because this man, he was responsible for every promotion inside the CIA for 12 years. So he has networks of people within that agency, and they better figure this out. I mean, it's hard to believe that they don't know this. It would be impossible for me. I don't think that I know anything that they don't already know. But the proof is in the pudding, right? So, I mean, it's only been a few months, but they don't have 4 years to get all of this done. There's a certain point and a certain rhythm where it's going to get hotter and hotter. And when you have the Republican-controlled House and Senate, it's not supposed to get any easier than that.
Let's remember what McCain did to Trump. That's why he's so pissed off at him. And I'm sorry, the whole adage of, don't speak ill will of the dead, don't care, I will. I'll speak ill will.
He was a traitor. He took that dossier that they all knew was fake, that they all knew was funded by Hillary Clinton, and he made sure that there was a public narrative for how that got into the hands of the FBI.
Now you know why Trump hates McCain so much. Anyway, okay, we don't have much time left, like 10 minutes and the hour is up. I can't even believe it. And I got so many more questions about Lara, but we wanted to hit a bunch of the main topics this week. I've got so many more. You take one. Let's go rapid fire here the last 10 minutes and learn more about our special guest. How about that? Okay. I know we'll go back to current politics. We can't help it. We're all reporters here. We're going to go back to it.
I will say this really quickly, and then I have a different question. But because we hear accountability a lot, and I really want to know what, for you, accountability really looks like for people like Brennan or Comey. But more importantly, I do want to talk about just your home life, some of the stuff you're up to now, just outside of this world too, because I just want to know what's going on in your life day to day, and just
what do you do besides investigate bad doers and expose them?
What do you do to unwind?
You got charities, you got groups you and the hubs are involved in down in Texas now. What do you do for fun? Give us some other stuff. Let's give the news a break for like 2 minutes.
Okay, rapid fire. I have a podcast, Going Rogue with Lara Logan.
Yep, love it.
I have a small but very wonderful, talented, and committed team that I work with. I have a couple of things that I'm working on. I actually want to do a show that highlights independent journalism. So, I'm in the process of figuring all of that out.
Okay.
But I have 6 dogs. 5 of them Belgian Malinois and a hot dog.
Oh, I love those dogs.
I have a lot of cats. One of my cats just had kittens, actually. Wow. And I live in the countryside, and we do a lot of things for ourselves out here in the countryside. But you know what? There's a lot of work to be done because so many journalists have been derelict in their duties and responsibilities and have abandoned and betrayed the American people. I am overwhelmed with people wanting me to tell their stories. It's very difficult. There's a lot of these are complex investigations. And so, honestly, I spend a lot of time working because there is a limited period of time here. We're not in the clear yet. I just can't say
Agreed.
that strong enough to people.
Yes,
even in the state of Texas, there's still pornography in the schools. There's still a lot happening. There's a young reporter, Taylor Kramer from RGV Truth. He exposed how at the University of Texas in Rio Grande Valley, they ask the students to take a pledge to Agenda 2030. Oh. And he has videos of the pledges.
Yeah, no, we haven't won at all. We've got, we've got small little battle wins. We're all patting ourselves on the back, but we have not won this war whatsoever. And speaking of that, again, we're back to news headlines. Because Lara Logan has been in the region for decades covering the Middle East, I just wanted to get her take on not only all the riots we've seen on college campuses the last 2 summers in a row, but the election of this nutbag in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, this week, a guy who is, by all accounts, a radical Islamic socialist Marxist who wants to give free stuff away and probably won't turn over Hamas supporters or real Hamas people living in New York to ICE. He's already said that, wants to defund the police. This guy's a psycho. And New York Democrats just made him this radical rapper who was sticking up for the whatever five. I forget that whole story, but I read a little bit on the guy. I've talked to some New York friends, and they are worried. I mean, you got Republicans literally backing Eric Adams because they don't think that Curtis Sewell will win.
It's disappointing to me that you see so many influences and other people out there talking about the tariffs as if this is happening in isolation, talking about the war as if this is happening in isolation. This is part of a national security strategy that is about applying maximum pressure. Yes. People really don't do their homework. They don't understand that, you know, the Ayatollah Ali Khomeini in Iran is he doesn't so much run the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as they run him. This is one of the largest multinational criminal networks the world has ever seen. They're involved in blood diamonds. They're involved in trafficking of drugs, trafficking of weapons, trafficking of children and human beings. They are a massive global financial network of dark money from sanctioned oil and beyond, right? And so what is the Trump administration doing? Well, the tariffs themselves are part of this strategy. They're applying maximum economic pressure because economic pressure, the economy, finance, that really is Trump's thing, right? Yep. More than war. You can see where he's comfortable and where he's not. And so when you look at that, what have they managed to do? He used the tariff to get Europe and NATO to take on 5% of GDP will be spent on their own.
Just signed the China deal yesterday.
Taken that burden off the United States of America, and he is using the tariffs to crush America's enemies. And not just that, there's other parts of this where they have moved against Chinese ships, basically anyone that's ship that's operated or built in China, you know, that uses this digital system on board, which runs the ship. This is an intelligence collection system for the Chinese intelligence. And Trump has moved, you know, to prevent ships, anyone who uses that system, to not be able to dock at U.S. ports. So there's multiple other parts of the tariff strategy and the economic strategy that is really aimed at shutting down the money for these terror networks. Because let's not forget, the IRGC and the mullahs in Iran are the #1 state sponsor of terrorism worldwide.
Thank
you.
So
what has Israel been reporting?
Can you repeat that, Lara? For all the people in the cheap seat on the right saying, let Iran be Iran and we shouldn't get involved and quit doing the Jews' biddings, blah, blah, blah. I'm so tired of hearing that from right-wing conservative influencers. Who's the biggest sponsor of terror in the world, Lara?
It's Iran.
Thank you.
There's no question about it. And they have been for a long time. And if you look at what the Israeli media has been reporting, they've talked about how Israel has gone after not just nuclear targets, but economic targets, and also gathered all the data on the IRGC's economic operations, you know, in criminal networks worldwide. And so this is a strategy that is about squeezing people and applying maximum pressure for the national security of both the United States, its allies, and for the rest of the world. Because who's working with Israel behind the scenes? Jordan, Syria, right now Syria, to a degree Qatar, because what was his Middle East visit really about? What was that gift from Qatar of that plane? What was all of this really about? It was about this operation. It was about applying maximum pressure. So, you know, I would just urge, I'm not, you know, no one's in favor of war, especially not anyone who's ever been to war and anyone who's ever seen what it does to the people there or to those who are fighting the war and to, you know, and I mean, my husband is an Army veteran. And so this is not something that's distant to me. I've spent, you know, 2 decades on battlefields.
Yes, you have.
For goodness sake, and I live with this. And so I'm, you know, no one who's ever seen that up close would ever advocate for war. But what does peace through strength mean? That's what you really have to ask yourself. How do you show strength? And look beyond the headlines. Look to the reality, right? And try to look what is right in front of you, but perhaps is not being spoken about as much. And, you know, for all those people who think, well, Iran can have nuclear weapons, Israel's got nuclear weapons, the United States has, you really are not paying attention.
Thank you. You're not doing your homework.
In this country.
Here's what I said on the show last week. And the week before, we've been discussing this stuff with Iran for 3 weeks now. And what did I say? What did former Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam say? It's like walking into a gun store in America. If you ask for a gun and say, I'm going to kill somebody, they don't give you the gun, they call the cops. That's Iran. They want the nukes to kill people. If you walk into a gun store and say, I need a gun to protect myself, they're going to sell you one. Why does Israel have the nukes? To protect themselves. Period. Do your damn homework. Can we please clone Lara Logan for future journalists for the next 1,000 years in this country? They're giving me the rap because if we had journalists like her at every news outlet, like CNN, you scumbags, and MSNBC, and yes, even Fox, and the big old three, and the wise papers of record, New York Times, the rest of them, if they did real journalism, like she has done for decades, this country would be a better place because the people would get the damn truth. And I'm going to wrap it there. Please. Give you the final question to her, and let's let her wrap things up.
Yeah, well, if I could, I just want to get your thoughts then on this. So there's a huge contrast between the way the Biden-Harris regime handled all of these issues on the world stage and the way Trump's doing it, obviously. But the thing that really sticks out to me is when they went to Kamala Harris and they said, what is your message for Iran regarding any kind of military aggression? Same basically for Putin, anyone else. She said, don't. That was the only thing that they could come up with is just, please don't. Whereas with Trump, it's go to the region, meet with world leaders, surround, contain, military pressure, diplomatic pressure, anything,
economic pressure,
any lever of institutional power, use that, short of going to war. And then with the strikes, everyone said, oh, well, you're going to run the risk of it. He took out Qasem Soleimani, and we did not go into World War III. That was very effective. I think that compares to now. But I just want to get your thoughts about the contrast between someone like Kamala just saying, please don't, versus Donald Trump coming in and saying, actually, we're going to use the power we have to protect our country, to protect our national interests, and to protect our allies. And now it's actually working, and people like Kamala are just, they're silent about it.
Of course they are.
Well, it's the difference between being a puppet and being a real leader.
There you go.
I mean, that's all you have to really say about it, right? I mean, Kamala Harris is not a serious choice for president. The woman is a complete moron, and she's absolutely and utterly worthless.
Californians might make her a governor. She's thinking about running out here where we live.
Please don't. Please.
I mean, I'm serious. She's thinking about it.
The only way she would become governor is where they steal elections. That's the only way.
They still
There's no
steal
way
them here.
Democrats don't even want her, okay? And that was obvious in the last election. But the most, one thing is important. I just want to say, I'm not the only real journalist out there. There are others. And I would urge, it's up to us to fight for real journalism because independent journalism is great. You're at OAN, you have some resources behind you, but there's a lot of independent journalists out there who have nothing behind them and they have no one behind them. And I learned some of the best lessons from older journalists and people who were mentors or seasoned journalists who slapped you down in the newsroom because you didn't know what the hell you were talking about because you were like, 20 and a half years old. And so I want to urge people to invest in real journalism and not to give up. Don't give up for that. We have to fight for what that is. We should have people on the ground in North Carolina. We should know if people are still living in tents or not. We should be able to, to have young journalists coming up that have a pathway to, to having a semi-decent life instead of living on the edge, being savaged for telling the truth. And maybe they'll survive. That is not a model of journalism that benefits any of us. And yes, the mainstream media, legacy media has slit their own throats. But who gave them the knife? That's the question we haven't yet answered.
Lara Logan, everybody. We needed 2 hours with her. Please come back. Obviously, come on the talk show. Do Riley's talk show. Do Matt's talk show. Do the rounds. Chanel's talk show. Be a fixture at OAN because we have a lot of young journalists too, and I think a lot of young ladies behind the scenes and on air that Lara, you could be a mentor, a source of inspiration for. And so God bless you for what you do. I love you. I tell you that all the time. Thanks for coming on and spending over
nice to meet you, Riley.
Hour with us. Yep. God bless you. I know you got to run. You have a dinner. Go, get out of here. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Take care, huh?
Yep.
Absolutely.
God bless you. Now you know why I love her.
Yeah, that was remarkable.
Is she not amazing or what? Again, I'll beat a dead horse. Can we clone her? Could you imagine if you just had a couple of Lara Logans today in 2025 at CNN actually covering the war, the tariffs, Trump's presidency, fair and balanced? And if you had a few of them at Fox, a few of them at MSNBC, the big old three we discussed, have a couple of her at 60 Minutes, New York Times. Think about how the American public would have a different view of the Trump administration if there were honest journalists who, as she said at the beginning of that interview, you do your homework. You don't report on anything until you do your homework. She's like, I would never report on anything until I went to the source and got the information. Yeah. She did 20, 30 years in combat zones.
Yeah, look.
Okay?
It's the sense of curiosity in terms of actually researching things so you know what you're talking about before you even start to form opinions, but also just the sense of integrity. Only talking about things when you feel like you really understand them. There are so many complicated issues, so many things going on right now. People have very strong opinions, whether it's war, tariffs. It's like with this Iran stuff, everyone all of a sudden is a foreign policy expert overnight, just magically, just like that. You know,
and their talk show hosts and their news anchors and their podcasters and their influencers that have millions of followers, and they think they know. That woman's been over there in the region. She sat down across from leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas and things like that over the decades. And you know, we didn't get into what happened to her in Egypt, but you know, she got sexually violated. Her and her team, they were attacked by a violent mob. I mean, she went through hell. You know what she did? She got on the horse and went right back and kept covering stuff in that region to tell the truth. But like she said, I would never tell a story about the people of Syria, about the people of Iran, unless I was there on the ground asking them, researching, investigating.
And that's why you had an Iranian on your show recently, this week, to talk about these issues.
Last night, he's one of the exiled parliamentary members who are saying, look, we don't want America or Israel's money, soldiers, or equipment, just your verbal diplomatic support, and we got this. We'll get rid of the regime. We want to come back in, and they want to replace it with a democracy. Yeah. And I agreed with him 110%. That's why I backed what Trump's doing. That's why I didn't talk any stuff against the president like others did in our movement because they thought he was going to take us to war. Let the man do what he's doing. You heard what Lara said. He is using, and I said this on the show, he is using the tariffs and the economic fights to also wrangle and negotiate the end to wars.
It's a bargaining chip.
You don't think that all this too relates around dealing with Putin and Russia? Russia's been helping Iran, China's been helping Iran. All this, he's talking to Putin now about the Ukraine thing as well, and it relates back to what he did in Iran. All of it's connected. He knows what he's doing. Just relax, folks.
You both brought this up, though, and I think this is something we have to grapple with. Because eventually, President Trump, he can only serve this country for so long, and we have to think big picture. Where are we going to be in 10 years? 20 years.
Hell, we're going to be in 3.5.
Yeah.
You heard what Lara said. We don't guarantee it's going to be a J.D. Vance or another Republican that'll win. You think the system and the swamp and the media and the Democrats are just going to let us get another Republican president in 4 years or let us hold the House and Senate? Y'all better be ready for a damn fight.
They're okay with Republicans, but not like Trump. He is not your typical Republican by any stretch.
No.
The McCain types, the Bushes, sure, absolutely, controlled opposition. But someone like Trump, a maverick for the MAGA movement, that is something they're terrified of.
He's a true maverick. They used to call McCain the maverick in the Senate. Yeah, whatever.
No.
And now you know why him and his family dislike the McCains so much. And the McCains hate the Trumps because Trump talked smack.
I didn't know.
That's because I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that he hand-walked, because he was in bed with the CIA. He hand-walked that fake dossier right up to the hierarchy and was like, oh, Trump can't get in. Look at this dossier. They all knew it was fake. And if you didn't know it was fake, then why'd you walk it in so adamantly like, oh, look at this report? Did you have an agenda then? If you did or didn't know it was fake.
Did you have an agenda, or are you really just that naive? I don't know which one is worse.
There you go.
Quite honestly.
I mean, we know the dumbest senator ever was Joe Biden. It wasn't McCain. He was a smart cookie. So you got to think he knew the dossier was fake, like Lara said. Anyway, we have gone so long. This was an awesome show. We've had some great guests the last couple of weeks, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Let's tell them who's on the show next week, because I did this one just special for you, since you are the music guru on the Anchormen Podcast. Next Friday on the show, independent conservative rapper, Canadian turned American patriot, Tom MacDonald. If you don't know Tom's music, you got a week to start listening to American Flags. Love that one. And there's so many. You can't cancel all of us, which we were featured in.
That's right.
And many, many others. This guy went independent, told the record labels, big middle finger to you, still sold millions of downloads and albums and has made a nice, pretty penny in the bank for him and his family. Totally independent now. And he's one of those guys in the entertainment world that I really, really, truly respect. I listen to his catalog a lot, especially when I'm out riding my motorcycle. And let me tell you, his music, his lyrics hit hard. And so I really am looking forward
he's a
to
songwriter.
Tom
I'm
MacDonald.
going to ask him about this, but he doesn't hire professionals. He actually writes his own songs, which is very rare in modern pop music, by the way. So I have a lot of questions for him because the music industry does not work like that anymore, sadly.
Yeah.
But on that note, really quick, if people out there have questions for him, submit them now.
Yeah.
Please do. I want to know so we can ask him while we got
Put
him.
them on the posts on X where we post this stuff or on YouTube, Rumble, wherever this show goes.
Please.
Put them in there. We read the comments. And so if you have a guest you'd like to recommend or questions for those guests, you put them in and we will start doing them on the show live to the guest for you, the viewers. All right.
Even just comments, by the way, not even questions.
Quick housekeeping because we're way the hell over. Big thanks to Grunt Style Foundation for being one of our proud sponsors. Yeah, we love the gear. It looks awesome.
All right.
Thank you guys at Grunt Style. Love my veterans over at Grunt Style. Check out Riley's show, 6 p.m. Eastern. My show's at 8 p.m. Matt Gaetz, 9 p.m. Chanel Rion follows up. Great primetime lineup, plus all the newscasts here 24/7 at OAN. You can learn everything you need to know about our network at OANN, 2 N's, OANN.com. Follow us on the social media platforms. We'll be back next Friday, 7 p.m. Until then, for Riley Lewis, I'm Dan Ball. Peace out. See you then.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.